Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for joining. I want to start with something I think a lot of us are feeling right now, whether we've said it out loud or not. AI has made it incredibly easy to create content. We're moving faster, producing more, and showing up in more places. But at the same time, a lot of that content just isn't landing the way we expect it to. So we're in this slightly strange moment where we're doing more than ever and somehow getting less out of it. And what's interesting is this is not an adoption problem. According to our research, 97% of marketing leaders are already using AI in their work every single day. And 89% of them are saving at least 4 hours a week. It isn't an adoption problem, it's a differentiation problem. Most teams are already using AI. It's part of the workflow. The real question now is, what are we actually doing with that time saved? Because while execution gets easier, you still have to decide what's worth creating. You have to have a point of view and make something that's actually resonating. I learned this the hard way at a previous company. We had this idea that AI could help us fix SEO. So we took all of our content, ran it through AI, and scaled it out. But it didn't go anywhere. It didn't land. No one read it, no one shared it, and it didn't perform. Looking back, it's really obvious why. But at the time, it just didn't hit. It wasn't that the content was wrong. It's that it didn't feel authentic. It didn't sound like us. And consumers are feeling it too. 70% say they can tell when content is AI generated because it feels like it's missing its soul. And there's another layer to this, especially for global teams. We're seeing that while AI is speeding up content creation, it's actually slowing down localization for many teams because the content wasn't built to scale in the first place. In fact, 65% of leaders say localization has slowed due to rework, even as creation speeds up. So speed is starting to expose problems that are further downstream. And I think that's the risk that marketing leaders are running into now. So today, I'm so excited for our panel. We're going to unpack this whole shift and explore what happens when content gets easier to produce, why a lot of AI content ends up feeling generic, what it really means to create content that works across markets, and how teams are starting to move from using AI as a tool to actually building it into how they operate. And I'm beyond excited about this group. We've got Catie Liken from NBCUniversal, who's been leading AI adoption inside large enterprise teams. Matt Hardy is the SVP at RWS Group, and he sees what happens when content actually has to scale across markets, languages, and regulatory environments, which is where this gets real. And finally, Mike Dobell. He's the vice chair of SOTA, bringing a perspective on how brands are actually applying AI across campaigns and creative workflows. So let's start with the shift that we're all living through right now. We've unlocked speed, but what's it actually doing to the impact of our marketing? And I'd love to start with what you're all seeing in your own words. When content becomes this easy to produce, where does it start to break? And what are you seeing that is noise versus signal? And where do we get more impact? So Catie, to you. Inside of an enterprise team, what's changed the most when AI sped things up? And did it create clarity or did it actually just create more noise?
So it actually kind of did both. So for us at NBCU, a lot of our work with AI is as a thinking partner that helps us move faster through research and synthesis toward creative strategy. It surfaces great information, it finds patterns, it really accelerates that analytical work that helps us to understand what we're even needing to ideate against. And so in that sense, the clarity is real. What used to would take us days, really pulling all that research together and building the foundation of what our creative is going to be, we can now do in hours or even minutes. And that's truly transformative for us. But the noise is real too, and it comes from a couple of different places. The first is that speed kind of creates a false sense of confidence in what the output actually looks like. So AI can produce these things that look and sound authoritative. You can get these really great insights that if you really dig in, you're like, oh, that it sounds amazing, and it actually isn't what you need. And so when you're moving fast, it's really, really easy to accept what comes out without applying that critical eye. And especially at the strategic level, if you don't interrogate the foundation of what AI is helping you build, everything after it is just going to be wrong. I think the second sort of noise that we're seeing is just change management. When AI codifies a new way of working, roles shift. Creatives become more creative directors versus doers. And it's really meaningful to have them really understand what their role is in kind of a new system and generally accept that and live with it and be okay with change. And then lastly is just what I call deadline pressure. I think what we're finding is when everyone's under stress, there is the tendency to default to old habits. And so even if you put a whole new system in place and it can be faster and better, when you are under that pressure, you just default to what you know. And so sometimes the new systems don't get tested as much as we would like them to because of the deadlines that are kind of facing us and the fact that we want to know that what we are doing is going to work.
Okay, so Mike, I want to ask you now, when you look at high performing work versus everything else, what actually separates the content that gets through now that the AIs really raised the baseline?
Sure. I mean, you mentioned the word signals earlier, and I think it's a really important point. Like the the work that's being done globally is just by nature very diverse, right? And so one of the signals that I look to is tool usage, and SOTA as an organization does annual member surveys, and we just completed our 2026 design tool and AI usage survey. And while the use of a tool doesn't, isn't determinative of success or strong work, it is a really strong signal about what's working within the machinery of the creative agency, right? So there's a few things we found. 72% of agencies have adopted new tools and are creating pipelines. And I think that creating pipelines bit is super interesting and super important. This is not just like single point tool usage. It's the chaining together of tools. And the impact on the work is real and growing. Like 90% of people are reporting that it is a speed and efficiency gain. 50% of studios are characterizing the gains as transformative or strong. So it's not just that there's speed and efficiency, it's that it's a transformative speed in terms of what they're outputting. So that's pretty amazing. And then we're also seeing these isolated pockets of agencies where it's having an impact on enabling new services. And so what we mean by that is that agencies may deliver X and Y today. Now they're being able to deliver Z. And that can be a really important impact on agency P&L, as well as the ability for a brand to go to a single shop, whereas previously they might have gone to many for a complete package of needs. What's interesting is that we're starting to see some tool attrition happening. So there's no like wholesale abandonment of conventional creative tools for design or 3D or video. We are seeing some shrinkage, like 10 to 15 point drops in usage within the community around certain creative tools. So that's super interesting, as well as some niche players just dropping off entirely. And so I think what we're seeing there as a whole is it's a signal of some tool consolidation taking place within the community.
Matt, let's pivot to you. So when that content starts to move across markets, what happens to it? Do those early decisions hold up, or do they really start to fall apart?
They pretty well fall away pretty quickly once you leave that primary market. What you're doing with those is really assuring your content for your primary language or your source language, and then as you then transfer that through the rest of your global markets, I think it's less about the content, but then more about how you treat that content as it starts to move out of that original market. So Catie was saying about how it feels fluent when you generate the content these days with AI, and that's absolutely the same when you use these enterprise AI tools for translation. So it really can feel, you can have a sort of false sense of security that enterprise AI is actually doing a really good job at translating, because as you say, Catie, it looks good, it reads fluently. The trouble is, in the world of translation, the noise that you mentioned, Meghan, what's the noise that's being inserted into this? It's that content then drifts away from where it started. It drifts away in terms of its tone, the voice of your brand. It drifts away in terms of the terminology that's being used. It can drift away in terms of being compliant with regulation in one region and then being completely outside of compliance in another region. And you mentioned in your intro, Meghan, the respondents had talked about the soul of missing the soul when the AI goes too far in generating. It's exactly the same with the translation. You lose the soul, you end up with something which is very bland and flat, and it doesn't take forward the benefit that you had in your primary market into your global markets.
I ran a campaign once that was all around national parks, but like the minute you translate to Europe, it no longer applies. So it's also just like, it's the soul of it, right? But it's also just the relevancy of the localization, I would think.
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. Sort of what we think about as cultural intelligence. It's not just the translation, but it's how you bring culture back into it. And idioms is an absolutely perfect example. So I was speaking to a customer last week, and it seemed like such an innocuous thing. They were talking in their mailer about spring and new beginnings, and all of this good stuff. And they were using a blossom tree as this metaphor in their email. Fantastic, makes perfect sense in the UK and in many other cultures as well. But apparently, if you translate that into Spain, the idea of a blossom tree has no sort of reflection of spring and new beginnings and all of that good stuff that they were trying to get across. So as well as translating, which is very easy to translate the words blossom tree, but much harder to recognize that blossom tree doesn't have the same resonance in Spain, and so need to translate it to something else. And in fact, oak tree was a much better fit. It'd be very hard to imagine just an enterprise AI pulling that out.
So let's do a little audience participation. And I'm curious from everyone watching today, what does good look like now in your opinion? When producing something is no longer the hard part, what actually separates the content that works from the content that does not? So this brings us to a related issue. The term that keeps coming up more and more is AI slop. And when people talk about AI slop, what they're usually pointing to is output that's technically fine, but easy to ignore. And I wonder if what we're really responding to is just rushed work. Catie talked about speed earlier and those deadlines moving up too. We're moving fast without considering taste. I heard a great framing recently. Stop obsessing over the speed of social and think about the speed of business. So to me, that means, does your team know the brand deeply enough? Do they have the right tools to empower them to go do the work that they need to do? And then do they have the permission to act in the moment? Those are the things that give us that speed of business. And if those things are in place, you can move quickly and still do strong work. Otherwise, speed just exposes the gaps. And I think this is where another issue starts to show up. It's not just quality, but brand integrity. When teams move quickly with AI, it's not just about whether the content is good or bad, it's whether it still feels like you. So Catie, I want to ask you, where do you see all of this showing up first? Is it in brand, performance, or audience trust that starts to slip? And where do you see it excelling?
Look, I think it shows up in all three because they're all interconnected. I think you can't necessarily isolate one from the other. I think which one you feel first really depends on what the work was actually built to do. But I think the source of sort of mediocrity, I guess, as it were, is the same. And it comes from that foundation. And by foundation, I mean that strategic work that underpins any creative endeavor. And that has to be bolstered by an understanding of the brand and understanding of the vision and understanding of what we're actually trying to create. And when that is, again, like I said, when that is weak, then everything built on top of it is going to be weak. And so when we talk about AI slop, it's really poorly directed AI that starts from the beginning and then cascades through an entire process. Weak research is going to lead to weak insight, which is going to lead to weak creative and production, and then obviously weak performance. And again, with any of those things, AI can move through all of those steps and it can do it really, really quickly. But at every single stage, that work actually has to be interrogated because at every single stage, it's producing something that feels final. Whether that's an image, whether that is an entire ad campaign, it feels final. And if you don't take the time to step back and say, hey, did this actually match the brand? Does this actually match the vision? Is there a real vision here to begin with? Or does it just look nice? And did it just happen quickly? The risk is really skimping on all of those steps and potentially losing the creative vision that should be driving it all. And I think that's where, Megan, you said this earlier, taste is the critical variable to anything that is driven by AI. And experienced creatives just have a structural advantage here. They've spent their careers developing a vision of what good looks like and the taste that they bring to the table. That is what they are paid to do, is to wield that taste. They're not relying on the technology to actually make creative decisions. They're just using it to execute a vision that they already had and iterate on that to get to the best possible outcome that is, again, brand compliant, that is vision compliant, that is exactly what it needs to be. And that idea of iteration, I think, is really easy to lose when that first pass that you get just looks final. So the question isn't whether the output looks polished, it's whether that person who's reviewing it has the taste to actually know the difference.
I love the love affair that this conversation's having with like professional creatives and like the space for taste. I really feel like I've been talking for the last couple months about like where craft and scale live side by side. And and Catie, you talked about how like if it's weak research, if it's a weak point of view, if it's a weak foundation, the output is weak and you have to inspect it at every stage because the finished product can look so good. I feel like there's a joke here too about, especially when the model is telling you how brilliant you are for asking that question, and how brilliant your framing is in the beginning. So Matt, if you're not inspecting it at every stage, what really happens when that content gets scaled globally, and how does it amplify the problem?
The risk is you lose that cultural and that domain piece. And I really like what you just said there, Megan, that the difference between craft and scale live together. And that's very much the world that I live in, which is, there's more content than you could today possibly think about processing with humans. So there's lots of decisions that people make about where they apply humans and where they just don't at the moment apply anything, or they apply enterprise AI. So the rules that I try and codify in the products that we produce is, well, how do you figure out what's going to get what? Where are you going to apply those humans who have the taste, as you say, Catie, in order to be able to recognize good content, or are super culturally and domain aware translators? Where's the content which has high enough needs for validation or creativity that you need to have humans? And then where is content lower risk, lower impact content, where you can tolerate, you can accept, you can benefit from the scale that AI brings to you? So that's the opportunity for amplification, and not to say that you need to have these super skilled professionals who are involved in every loop. No, you need to understand the risks and the value of all of your content, and then you appropriately divert content down different treatments, so that you can minimize the risks of scaling the bad, and really look to amplify the good. Because I think you mentioned at the beginning some numbers about your survey, which was that, was it 65% of customers thought that their process was slowing down, their translation process was slowing down. We've seen research that shows an extra 20% of content, 20% of effort being added in order to fix this poor content as it goes through. But that's really just the poor treatment by AI to translate it. That's not saying that there's poor content as well. So that would increase that effort. So there's huge risk for misaligning those processes and accidentally, or using the wrong AI, or trusting the AI too much. And yes, you would absolutely amplify massively those problems that you see in source through your global content.
I think that's crazy. I think what you just said was that 20% more time is spent on fixing bad translation almost. Not to mention that assumes that you already have good content to start. Like, wow, what a fundamental misunderstanding of how we think about it today. And I really keep sitting with, I don't think it's anecdotal. Nearly 80% of leaders say AI is increasing inconsistencies in content quality, and 41% of marketing leaders say that AI slop is already a considerable challenge. I know I feel that way. And 69% of my peers really believe that the future of ads kind of risks all looking the same, that we just sort of shake out to the lowest common denominator. So it's really not just about efficiency. As a marketer, it's about differentiation too, right? How do I connect with my customer in a totally different way? I keep coming back to the idea that volume without vision does not create an advantage. It creates fatigue. I talk to my team a lot about don't just read the news, make the news. That's what that vision is. And really having that point of view is actually where I think AI is not breaking through. I talked to somebody the other day who said, I don't need 1,000 pieces of content. I need one thing that people actually care about. And that really stuck with me, because I think what we started to equate speed with success, and they're not actually the same thing. So one place this gap shows up fast is when brands are trying to scale across markets And we talked a little bit about localization. To me, localization is also just actually relevancy. It's definitely not translation. It's definitely about relevancy. And that's where I think all of this AI work is showing up, is being really relevant with our customers wherever they are in the world. And I think it's an important distinction here. So when we think about seeing a clear disconnect, 86% of teams say that AI has accelerated content creation, but 65% say it's slowed down localization. Matt just talked about how literally 20% of the time is spent correcting that. So Matt, I want to go back to you. What's actually happening when content moves from creation to global rollout? And is there a point in the process where it tends to break that we should, start with by looking there?
Yeah, absolutely. I've mentioned it a couple of times, but that's because it's the theme of the moment, right? You bring in AI and you look to do more work with that AI, so you get more volume. So your humans are then dedicated to where the value really is, and then you massively scale with the machines. The thing that you lose is trust, and you lose that cultural awareness. So that's where it breaks. So I mentioned earlier that it feels like the automated translation is solved, like the generate some content button seems to be solved. It reads fluently, it's accurate. These days, honestly, it's probably on a par with human translation from a word for word, sentence for sentence piece. But then the drift that I mentioned in terms of the tone of voice, your customer, your own brand voice, the tone, the terminology that you use as an organization, that's what you lose as you move from your source language to your target. So that's where it breaks, and the break really shows itself in your audience's engagement. So if you, as an English speaker, read some AI generated content, you can immediately smell that it's wrong. You've mentioned this, Megan. You know it feels flat. It might be jarring. It's got some weird idioms that you would never use in your own day to day. And it's exactly the same if you apply just generic AI to do the translation. It feels flat. It feels jarring. It feels culturally tone deaf potentially, and also it could be illegal or non-compliant in that jurisdiction. So all of these things mean that it's less engaging for that customer, which is a problem because we're not creating content just for the fun of it. We're creating it in order to drive a purpose, right? For views on your site, for click-throughs, for whatever. Your content is designed to do something. There's an intent to it. And so if your customers aren't engaging to the right level because the translation is that jarring, feels off, then those business outcomes are going to be way down. It's going to be suboptimal. You're not going to be getting the views, the recognition, the click-throughs, etc. And you're going to have to spend more on tidying this up. So I gave you an example earlier about the blossom tree. There's another really one that I think fits here as well, which is a call to action button, as simple as buy me. Buy now, or contact us, or something like this. To reading that in English from an English speaking customer, that feels like an offer. It's an invite to buy me, or it's an invite to contact us. But in other cultures, it can sound really bossy or shouty or rude, and more like an instruction than an offer. And that audience is then completely turned off that content immediately. So the rest of the content can be perfectly great, and then you just lose your customers because they're suddenly turned off by literally 2 words on the button, and your choice of imagery around the world, claims that you make in one jurisdiction which are against regulation in another. So that's where it breaks, right? It breaks not on the translation but on the cultural transfer from one to the other, and really driving that same outcome that you had designed for that source content. You drive that same outcome into your translations.
I'm going to vulnerably acknowledge that I have been a global marketing leader for over 10 years, and I'm now thinking about every website I've had in every country and wondering how many times that I have buy now on the top right side, and I'm definitely going to go do a quick global search on this.
Well, do not worry, Megan. This is why we're in business. It's absolutely tends to be an afterthought that doesn't necessarily show up until you see this trailing indicator from your engagement with your audiences.
I'm really ready to turn to like some positive stories and some like great win stories. So Mike, I want to ask you, like, across soda, you must see just hundreds of the world's leading brands. or thousands probably, of the world's leading brands. And I would love to just hear some examples of where brands are getting it right. They're building campaigns that are designed to adapt across markets from the start. What does that actually look like in practice?
I think the autos and the streamers are really important ones to look at. Why? They do a ton of localization and personalization. You probably already know that when you see that movie poster for the show or film that you're about to watch, that's actually one of hundreds of different variants. And that's an incredible portfolio of creative output. Not to mention auto side, all of the surfaces that you experience in your automobile, the marketing, all the CRM. These are multi-portfolio, multi-surface brands that are experimenting a lot with both their means of production and using data as a backbone. They get the culture of their customers and how they live and work and play and where they do those things. They're building a taxonomy of those customers, and they're using that taxonomy, that customer understanding, which is, it's a database, but they're using that database to guide the pipelines. So starting with your customer, understanding, like what you would do in a retail environment, hearing what they're saying on the floor, and then systemizing that and then distributing that information globally. You want your pipelines to be kind of very, very pluggable so that you can you have a way of working, but that you can replace tools at a very low cost to improve the quality of the output, whether that, in Matt's case, that's a translation or a cultural nuance, or that's an image model. And across your pipeline, knowing where the governance teams should be stepping in and guiding and steering the work is really, really important. The ways of working has never been more important to get on paper, and that's something that's kind of been locked up we kind of went through the digital transformation era. It's been a lot of that information has been locked up in between people's ears. So getting that out, getting that in code has been actually, I think, a really healthy exercise for a lot of organizations.
I think about this steel thread that Mike and Matt, you're both talking about, is like so obvious, right? Start with your audience, think about your audience. And Catie, I know for NBCUniversal, the versioning for every single audience is just so paramount to what you do. So, I still want to know, is that something that happens later in the process, or is it becoming part of how you create from the start?
Yeah, so within the advertising group, we're actually mostly domestic, so we're not necessarily thinking about global audiences in the same way, but creative variation is extremely important to how we are working. And it kind of comes across in two different ways that are maybe a little bit different from what Mike and Matt were talking about. So I think first is, as we're working with clients, as we're thinking about different creative variants, a lot of it is based on how can we help our clients understand something more about their audience? What product is actually working? What messaging is actually going to work? And so it's about sort of developing insights and building in creative variation to test out what those insights could be, to be able to bring that back to the client and say, here's what's actually, here's what's actually breaking through. And then from the other side of it, creative variation is an interesting thing because, again, we are advertising content. Our content lives within our worlds, whether you're watching, streaming, whatever it is. Our content's going to be seen in the context of a commercial next to the thing that you're watching. And what we have learned, not recently, but what we have learned is that basically consumers are much more open to advertising when that advertising actually fits the context of what they're watching. And so being able to have several different creative variants to actually match the context of something that they're watching. So if you're watching a football game, for instance, and there's a huge fumble that happened, to be able to come into a commercial break and actually reference that in some way and then go into the client messaging actually makes that advertising much more resonant. And so again, when you think, the context of a football game, the sheer amount of things that could be happening that you might be able to reference and want to have creative variations against to make sure you're sort of running the right thing at the right time. There's a lot of planning that goes into it. And then again, a lot of work that actually takes to actually develop all those variants and have them at the ready so that we know that we can actually match the context and really hit the consumer in the right way.
I love the idea of design variation that's so uniquely bespoke to each customer and audience as we think about them, because what we're seeing is that demand for localized content is exploding. 66% of enterprise content is now multi-market. But the way we're creating content has not really caught up with that reality. So what does content that is actually built to travel look like? I just want to zoom out for a minute. And this is where I think the conversation gets bigger around content and open up that aperture. There are two ways that I hear people talk about AI. One is as an accelerant, making them go faster. We've been talking about speed for a long time now, but the other is as infrastructure. And what we're seeing in our research is that infrastructure is where really the step change advantage comes from. In fact, 99% of marketing leaders expect AI budgets to increase, but the shift is moving from tools to connected systems, like thinking all the way through the workflow and how those systems work together. I like to say right now, my team members feel like the API. Like the API is actually the marketer. And I want to get out of that world. I want to get to the system where the system are doing that. So what does it look like to move from AI as a tool to AI as part of your operating system? Mike, let's begin with you. How are you seeing teams rethink how campaigns are built end to end, not just speeding things up, but actually restructuring the way that work gets done?
I mean, let's use banner campaigns as a kind of a baseline. I mean, we're seeing teams that were at one not too long ago handcrafting every banner. Today, their job is to build pipelines that build banners. And so, pipeline engineering, copy supervision, supervision of translation, art direction. Catie mentioned, this people are moving into more directorial roles. There's a real reshuffling of job roles that's taking place, which is fantastic. And these pipelines that are being built are also doing a lot of this analytical work at both ends, understanding building the insights, building up the strategy, but also automating the shipping of these units to the ad platforms directly. So that compression of effort and elevation of effort is allowing a shift in mentality around volume. For 3 years ago, we were doing experiments where we were just running certain campaigns. We're like, what happens if we 10x the volume? And what we were finding consistently was just tremendous performance improvements. When you say, look, we're not going to worry about getting everything perfect. Let's let the algorithm figure out what's actually working. So we cut down the amount of time strategizing and building up the plan for variants. We would just get on with building them. And so 95% of the work in that scenario gets seen maybe once or twice, but it very quickly filters down to that 5% of highly performing work. The other pattern we're seeing is a lot of our members are reporting that their creatives are looking to performance results as creative cues. We talked earlier about getting your procurement right in order to get your creativity right. This is another one. This is creatives looking at data as a way to get their creative right. And this is this just general job role reshuffling that we're seeing, blending of the edges, if you will. And it's an incredibly empowering moment for creatives. They're looking firsthand at the data. They're using LLMs to help decode it, and it's providing huge complement to the work that they still do with their strategist team members and their data science team members. But for everyone, it's a very empowering shift.
There are two things in there that I just really resonated with. One is just the connection to data. Like as a growth marketer, first and foremost in my heart, I oftentimes joke that data is my favorite 4-letter word. The other thing you talked about that I think is really interesting is like a beginning of new jobs as well. And Catie, you and I both work in big enterprises. I've spent the majority of my career in very, very big enterprises. And there's benefits to that, right? You have more people, you oftentimes have more budget. Doesn't always feel like it, but oftentimes you do. But you also have more process, right? And so I'd love to hear from you, like on behalf of the big enterprises on this phone call, what is the hardest thing about making the shift internally? Is it the people, the process, or the technology?
I mean, honestly, you can't quite separate them, but for me at least, the technology has actually been the easiest variable. People and process are just much harder. I think the biggest pitfall in using AI to accelerate old processes is that you don't actually stop and interrogate what that process is and whether it actually needs to stay the same in this new world of technology. I think, we don't want to be using this great new technology to just do the same things, but just like a little bit faster. We really need to question what the old way of doing things is. Mike, like what you said, what are the new roles now that we have this new technology in place? And how do we actually have to reshape a process to really get things done the right way? And we live this for real here at NBCU. So as you guys may or may not know, in the world of advertising, advertising on connected TV is like more accessible than ever. All of these different streamers, they have these ad managers where anybody can go and they can launch a TV campaign. But the challenge to any of that is most small businesses who this is now open to, they actually don't have the creative capabilities to actually build effective TV spots. It's one thing to go do a Facebook post or, that kind of thing, but TV isn't a whole different thing. And so for us, we wanted to actually be able to scale our own creative expertise from our creative team and make that available to small businesses in sort of an economically viable way. So we actually built these research validated templates to build CTV creative inside Canva. And then the idea was that we would be able to utilize our team sort of as a managed service to then deploy those for small businesses very quickly and easily and very inexpensively. So once we had those all built, they're ready to go. We actually found ourselves thinking almost the wrong direction of now that these are ready to go, when we need to deploy them, we're just going to resource it the same way that we would do any creative. You need copy, you need an animator, you need a designer, and you stop it and you're like, wait a minute, no, we don't. Like the design is actually already built into these things and we really just need to deploy them. And so, and we also, frankly, as you said, Megan, we don't have any more resources to actually work with. So we're bringing this as a new capability with the same amount of people that we have. So we stepped back and we were able to actually design a whole AI-powered system that can customize these templates with just one really skilled creative at the helm that can build a lot in a very small amount of time. And then that leaves all the rest of our creative team to be able to actually apply their expertise where it is really needed, whether that's, a big new idea for the Olympics or anything else. We need to make sure that our creative expertise is matched with the sort of task at hand. But it has been a game changer for us, but a huge shift in saying we're building an entire new process. We have the system in place. It's actually going to be able to build, customize, and do all of this for us and leave us free to do what we really need to do. And so for us, getting people comfortable with that, it's certainly a challenge. And, even when that new way is better, I think it's just sort of a culture and a leadership challenge to say, this is different, this is new, and we're doing this way now.
I love so much about this story because democratization that helps your customers. But actually, what I also heard from that is it allows your creatives to do more thought leadership, high level work. It kind of takes that like low hanging fruit that they probably, no creative I know who went to school for years and is a tastemaker and a craft really wants to spend all their time resizing, right? Like so it takes that off their plate. And I love that story because it's such a value add for both the customer and the team. So, okay, Matt, you know what I'm going to ask you about? Like, what happens as we go across the world here? So, like, as you think about moving across markets and teams, how much of this is a process and governance challenge, not just a tooling one?
Yeah, 80% a process and governance challenge. But now with AI, what I'm definitely seeing is a shift back upstream, back towards the creatives to actually be controlling their own translation work. Now, what that means is that we, as a technology provider, need to make sure that we build the governance in to now the technology. So the things that localization team are doing now need to be handled natively by the systems. And, it's all connected to this emerging technology of AI. So that's what's driven the demand and the shift back to where the creatives are working. But now that same technology gives us the opportunity to do that governance work within the system. So it means that there's a lot of new roles which are growing up around the tech. So that localization team is sort of morphing into a team which is owning rules, implementing them in the system. They are designing the personas which the AI can use to test content before it's released, to test performance. And they're really running all of that governance piece, but rather than running it in process, they're running it in in terms of defining that in the system, so that when the technology runs, it can make sure that the same governance is there. So they're sort of encoding the brand, they're encoding culture, or we are. That's what my job is, to do that. That then that's then available to our customers to be able to bring that to bear on their content. And what a note I made, Mike, from what you were saying was you said that as you were looking to be creating content, you're looking not for perfection but for performing. And I think that's the added piece of governance, which is now a layer on top of the sort of traditional idea of governance that we've had, that it doesn't matter so much about the quality of this thing from a translation point of view, in terms of counting the number of errors and the severity of errors per many thousands of words. That metric, which was our bread and butter for proving goodness for decades, is now completely replaced by the idea that it only matters how well that content performs. And that could be a Super Bowl ad, or that could be a bit of a 24-hour live social media post. They've both got a thing that a job it needs to do. And can we get it to a translation level that allows it to do that job? And I had a great quote from a customer the other day, which was that the market doesn't reward perfection, it rewards utility at scale. I think that's what we are. That's the final, I think, piece in the puzzle in terms of the governance that we're looking to provide from tech.
That is a great takeaway, utility at scale. I mean, we talked a minute ago about how volume without vision falls flat. And that's you've got the scale, but the utility piece of it, right? I think what I'm also taking away from this section is that scale without structure just creates more issues. And so whether it's your brand guidelines, whether it's, the tooling that we're using, the stat that I oftentimes come back to is that 21% of localization budgets are now being lost to rework, which is essentially a tax on growth, right? So getting that right from the upfront, I think exactly as you three all talked about, is like what helps reduce that tax. So there's one question that I keep coming back to personally, and we talk a lot about AI giving teams time back, but I don't think we have a great answer yet for what we're actually doing with that time. I'm just being really vulnerable when I say that. But 89% of leaders are saying that they're saving hours every week, and that's a huge opportunity. So I have a question here for everyone watching today. How are you thinking about that time savings? What should teams be reinvesting in? And if execution is no longer the constraint, we'd love to hear your answers in the chat. Now, let's make this real. What does intentional AI actually look like in practice? So we've talked about speed, quality, and systems. And there's one final piece that we need to address. Rather than walking through features, I want to show you what this looks like as a workflow. The shift here is simple. We're not just creating content faster, we're creating something that can actually scale.
Amazing. Hi, everyone. Thanks, Meghan. I'm Kevin. I'm one of the SC here based in EMEA for Canva, and I'm going to jump here to show what this actually looks like in practice. So I'll be one of you, finally. We're going to say that I'm a marketer, and I'm going to show you how you can go from early campaign ideas to building a brief and also producing those assets at scale. So everything will be all in one place. We will just be leveraging Canva. So I've said it, I'm going to be a marketer, and here we're going to say that I'm a head of marketing. I'm a head of marketing at the company that we call Geller. Geller, for those of you who don't know, will be a company selling beauty products. And there's actually a big campaign that I'm working on as a head of marketing. We have that new serum that's going to come out for Q3. So this is a big campaign that is about to be launched, but there's nothing official yet in my company. We've just been ideating with my teams on different Slack channels, ideating also on some emails, but today it's actually Thursday. And before the end of the week, there's two things that I would love to do. First thing, I would love to actually set up the brief, my marketing brief, my different teams. So like that, I can equip my local marketers with the things that I want them to understand for this specific campaign. Second thing I would love to do, producing those assets at scale. I want them to have all the things they need to activate this campaign on the local market. So let's start with this. First, we're going to start from the Canva platform. You might recognize it because of the Visual Suite toolbar. So the fact that you can create anything in any format just within our platform. But as I said, on this Thursday, the thing I would love to do for step one is to do my marketing brief. So usually to do something like that, I would start with a document. Here I'm starting from scratch, but that's the first challenge that I've already told you, which is I've been ideating a lot with my team. There's already information scattered around my Slack and maybe other platforms. So I would love, first of all, to pull all of those information into my marketing brief. That would be perfect. So for that, I will actually leverage Canva to pull those information for me. Here, you will now have Canva AI on the sidebar of your editor. It will be your creative partner being here to support you throughout your entire creative journey. And what I actually need Canva to do for me is to create a campaign brief for that specific campaign we're working on. And I want Canva to pull all the information on those specific Slack channels where I've been ideating with my team, because there's 3 different channels that my marketers are actually using. And so I do know that I do have information scattered on those different channels. So here, super simple. First thing that Canva is doing for me is to scouting for me my different Slack channels. It will try to find, okay, is there anything on that Slack channel relevant for this specific campaign that Kevin wants to do for his brief? And then it will try to summarize all the information for me into my brief. While Canva is working, I want you to notice one thing. I didn't actually set that much context here in my prompts. I didn't say what my company is, who am I, who I like my marketing brief to look like, etc. The reason for this is that I've actually been already working with Canva for quite some time. So now the platform has been learning who am I, how I like my brief, which markets I'm actually responsible for as a marketer, all those things. So at the end of the day, when I need to do something, I don't have to set the scene, set the context, what I'm looking to do, how I like my things to look like. The platform already knows this for me. We're going to wait a tiny bit more as Canva will now start to produce my brief for me. But one thing that I actually want to show you is the memory. Here, I've been working a lot with Canva. So at any point, I could see all the things that the platform remembers about me. For example, they actually know that Jamie is my boss here, my CMO, the different pillars that I like to see in my campaign briefs. We're going to see if they're going to be there. So that's a good thing to check. The different people I work with, the priority markets I'm focusing on, because I said I'm a head of marketing, but I'm a head of marketing for EMEA. So there's few markets that I do take care of. But here, if I go back into my brief, I can see that it's still in the middle of working for me. So there's my campaign objective, my target audience, key messages, etc. All those things that do matter to me when I want to do a marketing brief. But now you can see that I already got a good chunk of what I wanted to. Here again, it will actually do 80% of the job for me. It's not here to do everything. I'm still be here to do the strategic part of, is there actually all the sections that I wanted to see? For example, one thing that I see is missing is maybe a TLDR. So here, easy way to do it, either I modify it manually or I just keep having that conversation with Canva. So just by doing this, Canva will not redo the whole document for me. It will just adapt the different sections, maybe delete some things or modify anything if I need to. But you might start to realize something. That document is actually kind of lonely. When you work as a marketer on a campaign, it's not just about the marketing brief. Usually you would sometimes have the different templates signed off by your creatives for this campaign, or maybe a spreadsheet where you would see all the assets that you want to create. And that's actually something that we already set up on Canva for this campaign. Something that I should have done, it's actually to start from the campaign workspace that we've set up for this specific campaign. Here, there's actually everything that matters to me when I need to work on this specific campaign. For example, here, I will just quickly drag and drop the brief that we just did here and put it inside my workspace. So like that, when I will have to work on this specific campaign, I do know that in this workspace, there's everything that I need to see. So there's my marketing brief, but you can see at the next page, we actually have a spreadsheet. And just to stop here, this is actually one of Canva's superpowers. Inside the workspace, you can have multiple documents in multiple formats. Usually as a marketer, you might have your spreadsheet with all the assets you need to produce on another platform, maybe your marketing brief on a document that lives on a drive or somewhere else, and your assets that will live on another platform. Here, everything is centralized and streamlined. So whether it's me as a head of marketing or maybe my local marketers, they will know that everything is here. They don't have to try to remember where to find the things. But okay, here I have a spreadsheet. And just to maybe zoom out a bit for you to understand, this is our content factory. So as I said, I'm a head of marketing for multiple markets. So I need to produce assets at scale in multiple languages and multiple formats. And this is actually where I orchestrate everything. Essentially, for you to understand this content factory, one line in my spreadsheet is actually an asset that I need to produce for a specific market. You can see here that I actually have 4 different assets for my French market, and that's because as a marketer, I have 4 different audiences, which means different headlines, ways of communicating, and maybe also sometimes some pictures. So you can see here that I've already been ideating with my team on the headlines, subtext, and call to action, and I've done that for all the markets that matter to me. So I have France, I have Germany, I have UAE, and I also have UK. So this is my content factory. If I keep moving forward in that workspace, you can see that my next pages are actually the templates that have been signed off by my creatives. I've been collaborating with them as the head of marketing on what it should look like and what we should feel when we see this specific campaign. So it's great. They've actually been setting up 3 different formats for us. Here, I have a digital one. I also have a 1x1 format, and then I also have a banner. So that's perfect. On one side of my workspace, I have all the assets I would love to produce. And on the other side, I have the templates I would love to populate this information into. So now we will go into step 2. As I said, we've done step 1, which is the marketing brief I wanted to do. And now I want to produce my assets at scale before going on a weekend. So next week, I will be able to equip my local marketers with all those assets. So for that, it's super easy because you can see that we are actually already know all the things we would love to see on those different assets. So now the only thing that I actually have to do is to select all the information I would like to leverage. And we're going to do an action that is actually called bulk create. So here, bulk create will just confirm the data that we want to use. Will ask me, where do you want to populate it? I want to stay in that same workspace. And now it's just a question of connecting the different elements of my templates to the columns of my spreadsheet. So here, for example, I have my headline and I've already clicked on connect data and I've connected it to the column called headline. So all my different headlines will be populated here. That's the same for my subtext, and I've also did it for all the other different formats that I have here in that workspace. So now it's already good to go. I could already create my 16 designs, but here I'm a head of marketing that needs to equip my local marketers, so I want to also ensure the file name consistency. I want to make it very easy for them to find an asset by just looking at the title of it. So now I can finally create 16 designs. 16 designs because there's 16 different lines on my spreadsheet. But it's actually much more than 60 designs that we are creating right now because inside one of my assets, I actually have 3 different formats. So it's almost a total of 50 assets that we just produced right now. So as you can see, Canva AI just created a new column for me and attached all my different assets into the columns. So if I would like, for example, to see that French version, I will just open it and I will have very easy access to now that localized asset. So here, I'm French and I can already tell you this looks perfect. Maybe there's a few things that I would do manually as a local marketer for the French market, but here, most of the job is done for me. So that's essentially what I wanted to do. So I'm super happy. As you can see, if I go back inside my workspace, everything has been produced, so now I'm good to go. I can finally go on a weekend. But there's actually one thing that I want to do before closing my laptop. I would love to stay aware of anything that might happen related to that company that might actually impact my job as a head of marketing or my local marketers. To give you an example, Callum Geller is actually a very large company. I have to collaborate with other people from other teams, whether they are based in the same office or maybe in another country sometimes. And here that's actually the case. Because here, my creatives, they are based in Australia, which means that when it's going to be Monday morning for me, it's going to be the evening for them. And a lot could actually happen. So one thing that I want to set up before closing my laptop is to actually go into Canva AI and to set up a recurring task. Here, I could actually say, I want you to, every morning, to scan some specific platforms for me and see if there's anything that should be relevant to me. So here, I will just show you what I want to set up. Every morning, I want you to scan that specific Slack channels when there's anything related to that campaign to see if there's anything that might impact my work. I could go here and schedule it and decide that it's going to be, for example, every specific weekdays. And I want you to start doing that every morning. So when I wake up, I will know what matters to me. So let's say I've set it up. I've closed my laptop. The weekend passed and now it's Monday. On Monday, I finally received that update from Canva for me. So Canva has been scouting, as you can see, my Slack channel, and it actually flags something that is important to me that I should be mindful of. Here, Brody, which is my guy for anything creative, and he's actually based in Australia, realized that the current color that we use in a specific part of my template is not good enough. It's not good for visibility, and we need to quickly update it before my local marketers activate those assets. But now it's perfect because, as you might remember, if I have to do anything related to this campaign, I just have to go back to my workspace where everything actually lives. And here, the problematic one is actually this call to action button. We're not happy about the color. We need to change its color to maybe the green one that we use here, the pine one. But you might think, Kevin, didn't we just produce 50 assets before the weekend? Should we recreate all of them or modify manually them one by one? The answer is actually no. As you might see, I've clicked here on my call to action button, and you can see that this one is actually a component. So I could very easily go to its source and modify any of its settings and cascade them across my different assets. So here, for example, the problematic part was the background color. So we'll just change it to the pine one. And now the only thing that I have to do is to publish the updates. So now we just have to wait 2 or 3 seconds. But here, essentially, as I go back here to my campaign workspace, if I click on it, you can see that now it actually realized that there's an update for this specific button. I could update all instances. For example, if I go even my hidden templates, you can see that even this color has been automatically changed. And that's perfect. Now I can be happy, I can be confident. My local marketers, they will use the most up-to-date version of the assets when they will activate my campaign. So that's perfect. My job is done. I've done step 1 and step 2. So now let's say weeks passed, we've been activating that campaign. A lot of stuff has been happening with my local marketers. They've done a great job, but now it's the time where I actually want to sit with them and see some results. I actually managed to get a CSV file of some data for those specific campaigns that have been activated on my markets. And I want to see a few things. I want to see what's performing, but also the most important for me, what's not really working. Potentially, we could reallocate this budget to other section of my campaign to get even more results. And so for that, I have a meeting tomorrow. That meeting will just be a few minutes with them to sit. So I want to actually do a presentation about that data to show them everything. So here, this time, instead of starting from scratch like we did with documents, I will actually let Canva do the groundwork for me. Here, what I want to actually do is to generate a presentation. So here, again, I will make a simple prompt. I will explain it with you, but here's the mid-campaign performance data for this specific campaign. I want you to highlight the top performers segments, the underperforming one, and also find some recommendation for me in terms of budget. So now, a few things I need to attach to that prompt. First thing, I actually need to attach the data, otherwise the platform won't understand for me. So here I have a CSV file, but one good thing to note as well is that instead of attaching that CSV file, I could very easily connect the different apps that I use here on a daily basis. If I would have, for example, that data living in the Sheet or in my Microsoft 365 or any other platforms, I could just connect them and let Canva surface the insight for me. But that's great. I already have my CSV file. Second thing that I would love to do is that here we're talking about creating a presentation at Calendar. And at Calendar, there's very specific ways of doing those presentations. I need to follow the layouts, the colors, the tone, etc. All of those things when I want to create a presentation. So I want to make sure that Canva, when it will actually create something for me, it will follow that very specific way that we do presentations here in my team. And that's the specific layout that we usually use. So I want to connect it to my prompt as well. I could have done much more. I could have, for example, asked Canva to check one of my documents, or maybe check the internet for me, but that's everything I wanted to do. I want to be a bit more specific, design a presentation for me, and again, I want it to be short and sharp. It's not an hour meeting. I'm just sitting with my team for maybe 10, 15 minutes, and that's it. So now I will just click on Submit. As I click on it, now I will go back again into the editor, but now I will have Canva on the sidebar with me to support me during that creative journey. Here, it's just a question of waiting first for Canva to understand all that data for me. Before even generating anything, Canva will do one thing, which is generating the outline for me. Canva will essentially say, okay, Kevin, this is what I actually envisioned for your presentation to look like. On page 1, I would love to actually show this. Page 2 will be about this, etc., etc. So before getting my presentation generated, I will be able to play with the outline with Canva. I could either refine it manually or keep having that conversation until I'm happy about that actually outline that I got. So we just have to wait a tiny bit here, but one thing that I could show you is what I actually got by doing it just before starting this webinar with you all. So here, I will just show you the exact conversation that I had with my AI. So first thing that I got out was the outline, as I said. So here it told me, Kevin, this is what I would love to put. As you can see on page 2, there's actually some numbers that got pulled from my CSV file, but I was very happy about it. So I just click on Generate Presentation. As I clicked on it, I had to wait 2 more minutes, and this is the actually output that I got here. So a few things I want you to notice. First, it's following exactly the template that I've been attaching to it. And the reason for that is that my creative decided what could be modified either by the user or by the AI within that template. So there's some elements that are still locked. There's some elements that are not really locked, which would let the end user, which is me, or the AI a bit more creative. The other thing I want you to notice, it's personalized. It's been understanding, okay, what is it about? Who's that person? So it's me, Kevin, from the marketing team. And it's been starting also to put some data viz for me. Sometimes it won't be perfect. Again, it's here to do 80% of your job. Now the task for you is just to essentially be a bit more strategic. Is it exactly what I want to see, what I want to share with my team? Maybe the colors are not exactly perfect, but here again, I could very easily change it if I wanted to and cascade that across my different pages if I wanted to. But here I'm super happy. My presentation is good to go. It identified the winners, maybe the underperforming ones, and also gave me some reallocation budget ideas. So what I should do with my team right now. So that's perfect. I had my meeting, everything went well, and basically my campaign finished and we had amazing results. So that's actually a look at how you can go from an idea to execution and even optimize things, as you can see here with the CSV file, all within Canva. Hopefully that actually inspired you. I would love to just leave this webinar feeling like, actually what I've seen here from Kevin, I would love to actually try this out and see if it works for my company. I would take that as a win. But here, super happy with what I've showed you. So now I will hand it back to Meghan. Thank you, everyone.
I mean, wow. This is the part that starts to feel like infrastructure, because now you're not just creating, you're learning what's working, what's not, what's resonating in different markets, and feeding back into the system. What this enables is faster execution, higher quality output, and consistency at scale, without forcing teams to choose between them. We've talked about speed, quality, and systems. So stepping back, I think a few things are becoming clear from our conversation. Speed is no longer the differentiator. Quality, relevance, and trust are. And as execution gets easier, judgment, we've also talked about taste and craft, that is becoming more important. AI has become the production engine behind marketing, but the differentiation doesn't come from speed, it comes from direction. Consumers are not rejecting AI, they're reacting to how it's used. 87% still say the best advertising needs a human touch. So before we wrap, I'd love to go around just once more. Catie, I'm going to start with you. What do you think becomes more important inside of marketing teams as AI scales?
I think the most important things we have to consider are insightful strategy and really good taste. Those are the things, like you said, Meghan, they can't be scaled, they can't be automated, they can't be generated. So as AI is handling much more of the execution, we need to have that sort of human touch on the other side to say, this is good, this is bad, and direct it in the right way. Because everything flows from that. Like I said earlier, slop is a cascading problem. If you get it wrong from the jump of the project, it's going to be wrong all the way through. And so that's what we need to be investing in and developing within all of our teams.
Amazing. So Matt, how about you? From a global perspective, what will define success as content scales across markets?
I think the theme I've come back to all the way through this has been the cultural layer, the cultural intelligence. And, we're working on the implementing technology which does that. But the thing which will be the difference between success and failure there is all of the assets that technology can use, the branding, the voice, the cultural roles, the persona definitions. These are things that are locked away inside product managers' heads and marketers' heads and content creators. And so as the technology allows and provides the scaffolding for this, We need to make sure that the assets that the AI can use to do this and transfer the culture are, there's time and there's investment made into those assets. Because from a translation point of view, you can talk about the scale of content increasing, absolutely, but we also have an opportunity from the translation point of view to drive the scale of translation. So as the cost reduces, because we get to use more machines to do the work, so you'd expect the demand to increase, but customers will find more use cases to spend that investment on more. So the measure of success for me is just more assets into more local markets.
All right, Mike, what's one shift that teams could make tomorrow that would have the biggest impact on the quality of work they're producing with AI?
I mean, I think it has always been making time for teams to experiment and creating a culture of experimentation and play. And that means actually blocking time to do things like hackathons and workshops, or time to reason through a problem as a group rather than to meet frequently about the status of things. I think we're at a point now where we should all have access to the same dashboards, and we don't need to, go through it, presenting the results. So I think really creating a culture where that happens with some frequency gets people comfortable, with the pace of change, but also with the can-do attitude that they can build the solutions to their own pipeline problems, or fill in the blank problems. And you get that flywheel going, and you get solutions to all the complexity of execution that is often glossed over in the boardroom. Where people in leadership often have high-level AI mandates for the organization, but there's a lot of but within middle management and below, they're graded on the quality of their execution, and there's a lot of complexity around that. So if we create a culture where that experimentation is happening, where people are building their own pipelines, building their own Claude skills, or name your language model skill, and tools, and sharing those around, you can really start to create a scalable impact within the teams and with the external partners as well.
We're in the middle of our AI week, and it's almost no meetings. It's fingers on keyboards, and I can literally feel the synapses of me and my team connecting in new ways, and experimentation and creativity and play. They're so powerful. I think what we're all saying is that there's no way that AI can replace the need for strategy. Human at the beginning. Catie, you talked about that a lot. Taste. I mean, we all talked about craft and scale and the power of creatives, and really having a point of view. If anything, it raises the bar for those things. So for everyone watching today, I want to leave with this question. What would your team do differently if tomorrow's execution was no longer constrained? Before you go, you can download the State of Marketing and AI 2026 report. And if you want to explore how to scale this kind of workflow inside your organization, we'd love to talk.